All right, as always, that was Colin Gow with his version of our theme song. This is Steve Shoney. I am the city manager for the city of Upper Arlington, and this is the Won't You Be Our Neighbor podcast. I am here with my co-host.
I'm Darren Schulman. I'm the city attorney, reveling in my new status as co-host. Because
I
I kind of, sort of, through help, booked a guest.
It only took you 3 years to book a guest?
It did.
Well, it took us to the beginning of our third year.
Yeah, so
two
our third
years.
season, you can say.
Yes.
Although I feel like there's more expectations that go on with being a co-host. I might want to retreat back to sidekick.
Just the sidekick. I'm fine putting
I actually
you
have to
in
prep
sidekick.
now.
There's some level of expectation.
Yeah.
So we're excited to be back in a rhythm, back into getting these podcasts kind of churned out. And I'm particularly excited today because we have someone joining us today who is a very long-time resident of this community. Also somebody I've had the chance to work with a fair amount over the last several years. He somebody who taught me a fair amount about the business of development, mostly by telling me I didn't know what I was doing, but doing it in a fairly polite way. And we have with us today Mr. Bob White. Bob White Sr., just to be clear. There is a Bob White Jr. who runs around periodically and can be seen in our community. But Bob, welcome.
Thank you.
Bob is the one of the founders of the Daimler Group, not the group that builds cars, but the group that builds buildings around Central Ohio. And so we're going to have a little bit of a conversation today. So
I'm more excited to try to get some dirt on pre-Darren knowing Steve. Because every time you get in these stories of economic development, it's always like, Steve's a jerk.
What outrageous thing did Steve say in a meeting?
Yeah, we've heard some really good ones, like not like inappropriate jerk, but like kind of.
No, it's not like Frank Cass where I actually kicked Frank out. I've never kicked Bob out of my office. I did kick Frank out of my office. Bob and I never actually had something where we got really mad at each other, unlike Frank and I.
Well, I'm still interested in talking to you, but that would have been good juice.
Oh, I can still add a few things, yeah.
So as I attempted to explain to you before, at the beginning of every podcast, we do something called Start, Bench, Cut. So I'm going to give you three things, and you have to rank them. One is you get to keep it. It's your starter. Use it all the time.
It's your favorite.
It's your fave. That which is on your bench is something you can pull out. You can have periodically. And then cut. It's third place. You're cutting it. It's gone. It's gone forever.
Not only is it third place, but it's gone.
Yes.
It does not exist anymore. It's not like a bronze medal where it's still cool. It's bad.
So you told us that two of your guilty pleasures were cars and country music.
Steve's really proud of this, by the way. I hope it lands. He did some work on this.
And I'm going to give you country music songs about cars.
Oh.
So we'll see. We have George Strait and the Corvette song, otherwise known as The One I Loved Back Then. Dwight Yoakam, Guitars and Cadillacs, or Alan Jackson and Mercury Blues. Do you know any of these songs?
No.
Oh. There was a better
But I
than
can
50%.
still rank them, yeah.
Okay.
Based on the cars, right?
Let's do it based on the car.
Rank them based
All
on the
right.
cars. So you got the Corvette song, Guitars and Cadillacs, or the Mercury Blues.
I'd go in that order, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
My first car was a Corvette.
Really?
Yes.
My first car was a hand-me-down Volvo station wagon.
So
Not quite as cool as a Corvette.
What vintage of Corvette was this?
This was I never had a car all the way through college or anything. So, and then I was drafted out of graduate school, and so I went to Vietnam in '70, and I took my entire paycheck and bought a Corvette.
So this is going to sound. This is an
So it
ignorant.
was a 1970 Corvette. No, yeah, 70.
This is an ignorant question, but I am not a car guy. So was a Corvette back then like a
$4,600.
I mean, is that like an expensive, super expensive car, or we just think they're cool?
Yeah, $4,600 was a lot for a car, and that's what I got paid for an entire year in Vietnam.
So it's like a year. Okay, so it
Yeah.
is.
So that was your
That's a
entire
chunk.
that was your entire
Yeah.
salary for
Yeah.
a year in Vietnam.
Right. They took out $5 a month for pop, but that was it. Yeah.
How long did you own that car?
Less than a year because I bought it and didn't realize it was a sports car, so I didn't think you needed air conditioning. But
This is not going to work out.
no. So then I got into real estate sales, and I realized in the summer you needed a car with air conditioning. So I bought the next Corvette less than a year later because I needed air conditioning. Because I'd go on a sales call and I'd just be dripping wet, and the receptionist would go, "Are you okay?" And yeah, I'm fine, but yeah.
Kind of hard to steal the deal when you're like literally dripping wet.
Exactly, yeah.
And then did you ever own a Cadillac?
Yeah, I think one. Didn't have very many Cadillacs, but yeah.
So what is the car of choice?
This is going to sound obnoxious.
I think I know. I think I know this answer, but
in my life, and I'm old, I've had over 50 Mercedes, 6 Bentleys, 6 or 7 Porsches, and 1 Ferrari.
So is the one Ferrari because it's not that good, or?
Yeah, I had it for 90 days. It was.
So how many do you own now?
How many cars?
Yeah.
5.
Are they like just on the street, kind of in your driveway, or do you have like a special?
Well, we have a home down in South Carolina, so we have 2 cars down there and 3 here.
Okay.
So it's not like a Jay Leno style airport hangar museum where you're keeping all
and we
these
drive
cars.
them all. It's not like they're sitting in a showroom or anything.
So you don't have one that's like a collect. You don't have any.
No, I don't
you don't
have
have
any
any like
collectors.
collectibles that. Okay.
No.
So you clearly know more about cars than I do. So
No, I don't know
What
anything
is your
about 'em.
favorite? What is your favorite? Like, if you were going to go get a car, and maybe it's a little bit outside. Like maybe it's something you've never been able to get before. Like, what would you want to get?
Well, at my age and weight, it's hard to get into the cars that I probably would be really excited about. So I would guess today maybe the Bentley convertible, maybe.
I've always wanted to get a car with the gull wings, like a DeLorean or something. And they have new ones that do that, right?
Yeah, there's lots of them that do
Did
that.
you ever own a DeLorean?
No.
I think if you went into the parking lot and you picked the car that you would least likely to have, it would end up being my car.
I don't know about that.
I don't know. We might be a challenge. for that.
2012 Honda Civic. Little rusty, but she works fine.
We had a Honda once.
Once.
Yeah, that was almost like, we kind of gave it a shot, didn't we?
Yeah.
What was wrong with the Ferrari?
It was a used one by an Arlington resident, and it just wasn't very good. I had it for 90 days, probably drove 30 miles.
Oh, wow.
And lost $10,000 for my 90 days, so it was very expensive per mile.
But you're allowed to talk about having a Ferrari. That might be worth the
Yeah.
$10,000 right there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just make next time. You know what? You keep trying to put in the budget to have
The Lawmobile.
a lawmobile. So Darren thinks he needs his own kind of company car for the city. I think to strike the right image for Upper Arlington, the convertible Bentley coming from a resident. I think you said it's 74 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a recommendation from a prominent resident of 74 years. I think
This is what the public wants.
Right.
It is what the public wants. Is this something you're recommending that we should do for Darren?
Highly. I mean, great story, though. When the kids were smaller, I don't know what age they were, but they were even before middle school. So we go up to MAG or whatever it's called back then, and they had these Ferraris in the showroom. And they, at the time, they had what the monthly payment would be. And so we go up there, and I think it was Bobby did it in his head. He goes, "Well, Dad, why don't we just get this for the weekend? It's only going to be like $100 and some bucks." I said, "Well, it's a good idea, but I don't think it works quite that way."
That's not how
yeah.
that works. Well, it's good that he was that age and he could do the
I
finance
know
on
it.
that.
I agree.
No wonder he's running the company.
Yeah.
So, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about, because Daimler is one of these companies that I don't think people kind of appreciate how much of Central Ohio you guys really kind of built.
Yeah, we started in '83, and prior to that, I spent 12 or 13 years in development. As soon as I got back from Vietnam,
How did you get into that? Not to sidetrack you, but
basically, I had no idea. I mean, I was a political science major because it didn't have a math requirement. And
I'm right there with you, my friend.
and then I went to Miami to get an MBA, but I only lasted a semester and then was drafted out of that. So when I got back to Columbus, I had no idea what to do. And my dad was in insurance, but he loved to dabble in real estate. And as long back as I can remember, I mean, I remember going out with him to meet Mrs. Henderson, and she owned the property on the northwest corner of today Reed and Henderson. And
is this why it's called Henderson Road?
yeah,
Oh.
I assume.
You know Henderson. That's
Yeah, and she lived in a house without indoor plumbing. I think it had electric, but I'm not positive. And so we ended up buying that property when she passed away, and we weren't developers or anything. And then he was able to sell the 50 acres to one end to C.V. Perry, and then the 25 acres to George Hadler. And so that worked. So then he went to Bethel and Sawmill and did the same thing. We had, again, the 75 acres on the corner of Bethel and Sawmill. And we also had a horse farm on Lane Road, which the small house is still sitting there on Lane Road. And so
I didn't realize you guys had owned, so the kind of small house that still got the kind of
Right.
outbuilding out
yeah,
there. Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
yeah. It was a horse farm.
So at this point, you're just kind of doing real estate. You're not really developing.
No, and that's so I thought, well, okay, I will. Maybe real estate is what I want to be in. And my wife was fortunate; she was a computer programmer, analyst, and so on. So she had a good job, and so I was able to say, okay, I'll just be a commission salesman. And so with that, since I was an overhead, people were willing to hire me. So that's how I really got into it. And again, $4,600 is an important number because that's what I made my first year in real estate too. But I didn't buy a Corvette with that money. So, but just that's how I got started, and then I ended up learning a lot and able to take that, and then we started our company, the Daimler Group, in March of '83.
Stupid question. Is there a story behind the name? Because your name's not Daimler, obviously. So
It basically came off the windshield of a car.
really, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was Daimler-Benz, and we liked the sound of that. We wanted to not put our own name on the company, and group meant a lot of people, and Daimler was, I think, had a quality level to it and so on. So fortunately, Germany never came out.
I was gonna say, they've never written you a letter?
That was the next question. Did you ever get a?
No, I
Well-
mean, we were never big enough to be a concern.
You know, this podcast has such a wide reach now. I apologize that the lawyers will clearly come.
Yeah, the whole UN's coming after you now.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
clearly going to come after you now.
They'll never take me alive.
So you started in, what'd you say, '83?
Yeah.
Okay. What were some of the big developments that you guys started with?
Well, initially we were, if you probably don't remember, you're too young, but in the late '80s, interest rates were 21%, and nothing made sense, and so on and so forth. And we felt there was going to be a pent-up demand of people that would want to own and occupy their own buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a commercial? Or,
Yes.
okay.
And then if and when interest rates came down, there would be this pent-up demand. And we were right. I mean, so that was our start, and we did a lot of smaller build-to-suit office buildings. Shortly into the whole thing, we got involved at Broad and High with the equity partner of Travelers, and then Catherine Levesque and so on and so forth. So a couple years in, we were doing stuff we had no business doing of a scale, and somehow we were able to convince Travelers that we were the right fit, even though we were a company of 4 people. But so we got into things that were much larger in scale than we initially formed the company to do. But and it just took off from there.
Can you, for people who aren't familiar with development, if you're a developer, what are you doing? Like, what does that involve? Is it funding? Is it planning, architecture, construction? Like, what are you doing with all this stuff?
Yeah, as well as alcohol. No, it's basically trying to understand a market and what somebody will pay for what you can produce, and is there a value over your costs? And sounds simple, but you have to have all those various ingredients. And back in those days, there was very little equity required. The banks would loan you the entire cost of a project. Today, it's a little different story. So you had to, but there's risk. There's interest rates that are running on that much leverage, and so you have to be fairly positive that you can rent something at a rent that will support the costs and the debt and so on. And Columbus was always, and still is, a community that's, for the most part, local developers, because a lot of the national guys would say, okay, here's Columbus, it's the capital of Ohio State University, all the propaganda we use, and they would come into town, but they would quickly leave because they could not produce the product at a cost and structure that, because our rents were too low. And it's still probably the case today.
So how are the local guys able to pull that off? Like
basically, because of more of a controlled environment of costs, how we structure, how we purchase land, and so on. And the national thought they could come in and do their product and get much higher rents. They left knowing that wasn't such a great idea. Over the years, we've been through many national developers that have come and gone.
Has anyone ever come and tried to like buy you out or say, hey, come join our big conglomerate or whatever?
No.
Is that not a thing that happens? I don't know anything about development. But.
Many times, I mean, capital is required. So there has been instances where local developers have been teamed up with national capital, but not usually totally bought and owned by an institution. Or they did way back when. In the 60s, we had Multicon and Klingbeil and George Duffett, and lots of those apartment builders were bought by larger national institutions, not necessarily real estate, but institutions.
So you've been through a couple different phases of kind of development trends. So, you talked about you did, I think the building you were talking about with Travelers is the one that's now at the northwest corner of Broad and High.
Yeah, One Columbus.
One Columbus.
Yeah.
And then there was the whole phase where everything was suburban development.
Right.
And now the most prominent project that you guys have done in the last couple of years is the Peninsula.
Right.
So you guys did the office. Did you do the you built and owned the office building down there next to the is it the Junto?
Junto, yeah.
The Junto Hotel. Did you guys build all of the stuff down there, or did you just
No,
build
we
your
just built the Junto and our office building. Flaherty Collins out of Indianapolis has done the multifamily. We'll break ground next month on another residential project for Flaherty Collins, but we'll be the builder on that. And then on the corner of Broad Street, we're looking at a significant parking structure, a grocery, and then more multifamily on top of that. So we'll be the contractor on that also.
So as you look at these trends, what do you is the trend? Do you think the trend toward denser development, this mixed-use development, like what you've seen, you just talked about downtown, it's basically what's happened on Lane Avenue here in UA. It's what's happening in Grandview and those areas.
Right.
Is that a trend that's you think is here to stay, or do you think there's another evolution that's coming after that?
No, I think it's here to stay. I mean, I think the mixed use on a denser development is something, particularly for an Arlington, which has got its boundaries fixed, a residential community with only small areas of commercial. I think in order to do what has accomplished today at Kingsdale and Lane Avenue and so on, it had to do that. You had to get density because you had to take down existing properties and buildings to make that possible. So your ground costs by just doing low silhouette buildings just wouldn't work. So I think what's been done in Arlington is wonderful, but we're certainly limited how much we can do with that.
Yeah. So one of the things I always struggle to explain to people is why it's so hard to replace like with like, or like with similar and better without kind of going to that next level. If you were to try and explain that to somebody, how would you do it? Do you get the question I'm asking?
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I'll still answer.
You'll give an answer of some sort.
Okay,
Whether you'll tell me you'll say what you want to say.
It's going to be your fault if he doesn't, Steve. So.
Well, it all starts with, okay, how much do you have to pay for a site? And when you have a community like Arlington, we don't have large sites, and the because of the values of the real estate residentially in Arlington, the cost to buy umpteen homes and tear them down for raw ground is just not feasible. And we've seen many instances one-off where you take an older home and maybe tear it down and put something newer and nicer up, and we've done a nice job on that. I haven't done it, but Compass and those types of people have done a wonderful job, I think. But we're limited to that. You can't, when you look at the cost of single-family homes in Arlington, to accumulate enough to do anything of magnitude, the costs are significant, and the ability to try to get 10 people to do something like that is almost impossible.
Yeah, and it's the next frontier, the final frontier in some ways for us as a redevelopment is back to where basically your family started, which is Henderson Road.
Right.
I mean, I think we're wrapping up a study that MKSK did on kind of what does the future of Henderson look like, and it is that challenge of some of those properties up there still doing well enough that it's hard to get somebody to see
Right.
the vision of, no, we actually think you should take this offline for a couple of years, lose a
Right.
bunch of money,
Right.
for lose the income that you're getting now for 5 years while you build something worth $250 million,
Right.
so that you can make sure that we have a few restaurants and bars and places we want to go. That's a hard proposition to get people to do, but
Right.
Yeah.
It's the difference is with the city is they're an institution that goes on forever and can wait quite a while to get a return on their investment.
Yeah.
Individual developers, especially as old as I am, have to happen month to month. But so I always thought when we were meeting with Arlington on Kingsdale, they had all these grandiose plans, but they didn't own a site.
Well, it's easy for us to say,
yeah. And they put all these restrictions on and so on and so forth. And back to Frank Cass, I mean, it's turned out incredibly well. Originally, I thought, well, these are great plans, but you don't own any of this. And Arlington stepped up and I think did a wonderful job of taking something that existed in the heart of Arlington and turned it into something very nice. It was still limited by retail of being single-story retail for the most part, and but overall, I mean, I think that's a wonderful example of the city being a partner and having the patience to stay after it because every turn you're going to hear, no, that doesn't make any sense. And so that Henderson Road, yeah, I mean, most, I don't know if Henderson's even in the city, is it? The road itself? Or?
So,
funny you should ask.
Funny you should ask. So today it is not. By the end of this month, it should be.
Okay.
Because when we went through and did the study, we actually reached out to the city of Columbus and we're like, hey, we want to partner with you on
Right.
this study. They're like, oh, we don't have time.
Yeah.
It's not a focus for us. And I said to him, I said, well, since it's not a focus for you, why don't you guys just give us the road?
Right.
The initial response was, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, shocked me.
In bureaucratic world, that
Right.
then takes 2.5 years to
Yeah.
say, okay, yeah, that actually makes sense into reality. But I think we're
Usually it's like, oh, we got to do like a long study to figure it out.
no, and it
It's
was
pretty simple.
It was great. It was a conversation with me and Mike Stevens,
Right.
who took over from me at the city of Columbus, and I remember saying to Mike, and I was like, Mike, I'm gonna say something crazy, which is we're Upper
Right.
Arlington. Why don't you just give us the road?
Right.
And he's like, yeah, okay, that kind of makes sense. Let's think
Yeah.
about doing that.
Well, Mike hears crazy things every day, so.
Yeah, he does. Trust me, believe me, I know how many crazy things he
Right.
hears every day. So you said you moved here when you were like 4.
Yeah.
So what brought your family to Upper Arlington?
My dad was in insurance and we were in New England for a little bit, in New Hampshire. He ended up teaching insurance at Purdue in West Lafayette. And one day we were out for a ride and we got hit head on and killed all 4 people in the other car. And my parents were in the front, my sister and I were in the back, and they were severely injured, went in different hospitals, and so he remembers the hospital saying, do these people have any money? And he had all this
Not
time.
usually what
Yes.
you want to hear when you're in the
Right.
hospital.
And he had all this time to think. It was questionable whether he could walk again, and he did. But he put his plan together as to what he wanted to do with the rest of his life, and looked at various cities and so on. And again, some of the things that we always preach about. He wanted a state capital, the large university, Patel, other things that, and Columbus was a very strong insurance city, and still is. But so that's how he picked Columbus. And then when you came to Columbus, Arlington, at that time, which was 1950, it was basically Bexley, Arlington, or Worthington, and so that's how we ended up here. And he was the general agent at Mass Mutual for many years, and was able to borrow money off of his renewals is how he got into real estate. So he didn't really love insurance. It was just a means of making a living and then doing entrepreneurial things with the ability to borrow.
I'm kind of fascinated by the scientific process by which he's like, well, I got to go to a capital.
Right.
Have university.
He did, and he was a very smart man. So.
But you stayed. So
Yeah.
you've got a pretty long run. So
Absolutely.
what's led you to stay here? Because did you use that same reasoning, or you just kind of like it, or what?
I think Columbus and Arlington specifically is a wonderful place to live and raise a family, and all the things that we preach about are true, in my opinion. And so there was no reason to go anywhere else. I married a gal that was from Louisville, but we moved here, and Louisville's wasn't a whole lot different than Columbus. We never really thought about going anywhere else. Based on next week's weather report, we might think about moving somewhere else.
The streak is over after this podcast.
So, and then you've got, how many kids do you guys have?
2.
Okay. And do they both live in Arlington still?
Yeah, they both graduated from Arlington and live there and work for Daimler.
Okay. Yeah. So, you still got grandkids in the schools and all that sort of fun stuff.
Yeah, we got one that's graduated and is in law school, which is a tribute to how old I am. But and then we've got one that's a senior, and one that is a sophomore, and then 2 in 8th grade.
Okay. All right. So you're still keeping busy chasing them all around, and that's good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, listen, we finish every podcast up with 2 questions.
Ooh.
They're not too hard.
Do I get the choice, or?
No, you have
to
to
answer them both.
Yeah,
Okay.
you got to
All
answer them both.
But there's no wrong answer.
There's one. Well, there's one wrong answer.
Yeah.
There's one wrong answer to the second one, and you kind of answered the first one. So the 2 questions are: what do you love about UA, and what would you change?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of it. I think Arlington is a wonderful residential community, and we're not going to change that. We even if we wanted to, we can't. And the ability to add some commercial, both from a tax base as well as the benefit of the residential community, I think you guys are doing a heck of a job to accomplish as much as we can with what we've got. And I think location, Central Ohio is, we might take it for granted, but when you talk about everything in the Midwest and even the whole country, Central Ohio is pretty good, and a lot of things are happening here that are not happening in the rest of the state or even in the Midwest. So it's a very, very good place to be, and Arlington is incredibly well situated and has been blessed for many, 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 many years, and will continue to, in my opinion. So I just think it's a great place.
All right. So what would you change?
Well, I do want to tell you I've got a storm sewer that's settled, and we called Arlington a year ago, and they said they'd be right out, and they did come out and put 2 cones on it, but we haven't seen them since. But
you got the cone.
Yeah,
But you got the
I know.
Okay,
And
we can work on that.
And we didn't even decorate them for Christmas or anything. So, no, I think what you are doing and continue to do to look at ways to take the few commercial assets that we have and make them denser and better and in this century, I think is an area, and it's going to take a public-private partnership. And again, the time span for Arlington is a whole lot longer than it is for the individual developer. So I think that is happening in every community, and Arlington has both the good sense that there are only a few places you can do it, and that's good and bad. But we can focus an awful lot of our resources in areas that are known, and that's not going to change. So, I think do what you do, and while everybody wants to find a way for affordable housing, I don't see how that happens in Arlington, and a lot of the wealthier suburbs are getting heat because they aren't participating in affordable housing, but I don't see how that happens, how we accumulate ground to do more density and have affordable housing. And we talk about affordable housing, and we're talking about numbers that are still not affordable for 50% of the people that are looking for a place to live. And Arlington, I think, would even have a bigger problem with that because of our values. And so I don't know what happens there. I think diversity, I mean, when I look back at our graduating class that had over 500 people, we had not a single minority.
Not one?
Yeah.
Not one of any type whatsoever. So I think while we still aren't the most diverse community, we've done an incredible job of being far more diverse than we used to be. And but I don't know. I don't see how we solve affordable housing in Arlington without even with significant subsidies. I don't know how we produce it.
Yeah, I think, from our perspective, I think what we try and always look at is you make sure you do as much as you responsibly can.
Right.
And the housing is not a one-size-fits-all solution. You can't say that what's going to work here is going to work someplace else.
Right.
And just because the math problem is a different math problem in different places at some level, but at the same time, it's still the same math problem because it still, costs the same to construct stuff. But when you talk about land values and all those things, it gets hard. And so I think as we talk about it and as we think about it, we're consistently thinking about, okay, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Right? You look at, okay, how is it that we set it up? And I think one of the things as we talk to residents, it's really one of the things that Arlington always had, and I think we struggle to maintain it, is some places where you can get into the community.
Right.
Where a couple teachers, a married couple that's a couple of teachers, or a nurse and a firefighter, and some folks can get into the community and buy a house and start to build equity in the community. I think that is the piece. That's one of the pieces that I hear people really worried about losing, and I think that is something that we've got to concentrate on. And whenever we do density, it's like looking at it and saying, okay, how can we make sure that as many people as we can get to fit in here while being responsible with the public dollars? How do we make that happen?
Right.
I think that's the that's if you try and look at it as how do we solve affordable housing, you'll never get there.
No.
And it's just being realistic about it.
Yeah, and good example. I mean, when we went to look for a house when we were in '72, I think it was, maybe '71. We put a contract on a ranch on Canterbury for $36,000, and we didn't get it, but but it sold for 40, and so we bought a lot up in northern Arlington and paid $18,000 for the lot, and that was like, holy mackerel, that's crazy. And we're still in the same house, and that was one of our best investments, except I've added on and remodeled umpteen times, so it's probably not
So it's
good.
that same house you've had the whole time.
Yeah,
except you
we've
just-
been in the same house for all that time. But yeah, I don't. Density can help, but it doesn't make things affordable. I mean, it's so. Yeah, it's a tough one because I agree with you. How do we get the younger folks to come into Arlington when you look at the prices on the ridge and so on and so forth? That used to provide that opportunity. It's priced out of that now. So yeah, that's a big challenge for Arlington, and it's no easy solution, and it is going to take subsidy as well as creativity, and it's a tough task.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, Bob, thanks for coming in. Thanks for continuing to be an important part of the community and continuing to do things in the community. And you and the family are always there whenever we ask for help on anything. So I do want to thank you for doing that and taking some time with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, I enjoyed it. And most of it you can probably actually use.
All right.
You have
And a face.
for radio.
Yeah.
Okay, we